Christian always considered himself lucky. Not because he won the lottery or found money on the sidewalk, but because he was lucky enough to meet his soulmate. He and Nikki met at a party in Boston. Both had just graduated from college, full of dreams and still unscathed by life. She laughed at his jokes, even when they were bad, and drank her coffee without sugar because that's how you can taste the real flavor. He fell in love with her honesty. In general, Nikki never knew how to lie. It was both her blessing and her curse. After 5 years of marriage, they already had a house together in the suburbs, not luxurious, but cozy. Christian worked as an engineer at a solar panel company, and Nikki was a nurse at a local clinic until she became pregnant. The pregnancy was not easy: morning sickness, anxiety, fear that something would go wrong. Christian did everything he could to support her. He carried her in his arms, literally and figuratively. Their daughter, whom they named Emma, was born in the spring, and it was the happiest day of his life. After giving birth, Nikki changed. It wasn't a sudden shift, it was gradual. At first, she became more nervous. She would cry for no reason, avoided mirrors, and rarely laughed. Christian knew about postpartum depression. He had read about it. He didn't pressure her. On the contrary, he told her she was beautiful, even when she stood in front of him in a bathrobe with greasy hair and red eyes. Their family doctor, Dr. Michael, although Christian always called him just Mike, came every week. This had been agreed upon during the pregnancy. Mike was pleasant, experienced, and a little older than both of them. Christian trusted him. He was at the birth. He saw Christian holding Nikki's hand as she screamed in pain. He was the first to hold little Emma. Over time, Christian began to feel something strange. At first, it was intuitive. A subtle tension in the air when he came home and found Mike and Nikki in the kitchen. They immediately fell silent. He saw her lower her gaze. Mike started talking about some symptoms, changing the subject to something medical. Christian tried to chase those thoughts away. Doubting your wife, who just gave you a child. And your family doctor. That's crazy. But the feelings didn't go away. Nikki started putting on more makeup before Mike's visits. She once said that he was the only one who didn't look at her like a broken mother. Christian smiled then, but something tightened in his chest. She spent more time in the bathroom, took longer to respond to messages, sometimes forgot where she left her phone, but when Christian picked it up, she instantly appeared and took it back, saying, "It's just a chat with the girls." He didn't read it. Because he trusted her. At night, he woke up staring at the ceiling and caught himself wondering if everything was really okay. He didn't want to be paranoid. But this thought was like a thorn that had lodged deep inside him and wouldn't let him rest. And even when he began to doubt himself and her, he still thought, maybe it's just hormones. She had a difficult delivery. It will all pass. It's Nikki. She doesn't lie. And then one day he came home from work a little early. And everything he saw turned his life upside down. That day, Christian arrived home from work at 3 o'clock, a little earlier than usual. The company had cancelled a meeting, and he decided to surprise her. He bought Nikki's favorite cinnamon rolls, a new toy for Emma, and stopped by a flower shop on the way home. It had been a long time since he had given her flowers for no reason. Maybe it would help ease the tension between them. He wanted to show her that he was still there. That he loved her, even when she didn't recognize herself. When Christian pulled up to the house, he immediately noticed that Mike's car was already in the driveway. He didn't think much of it. Mike often dropped by unannounced to check her blood pressure and look at her C-section stitches. Christian smiled. It would be nice to have some company for coffee. But when he opened the door, the house was strangely quiet. Even Emma wasn't crying. He entered cautiously. The kitchen was empty. The rolls in his hands began to soften. He put them on the table and walked on, through the living room, where Nikki's jacket was lying on the sofa. The TV was off. Everything looked too calm. A muffled sound came from the second floor. At first, it was indistinct. Like someone was laughing. Then, something more like a moan. Christian froze. He didn't move for a few seconds. Then, as if something clicked inside him, he climbed the stairs. Each step echoed in his head like a gunshot. His heart was pounding as if someone were squeezing it. The bedroom door was ajar. All he had to do was look inside. There, on his own bed, with the sheets he had chosen with Nikki, she lay naked, disheveled, her eyes closed, and Mike, also naked, was bent over her. They didn't notice him right away. Christian didn't scream. He couldn't. His head was empty, like a room without air. Only one word echoed inside his skull, no. Not here. Not now. Not with him. Mike noticed him first. He froze. He jumped back, covering himself with a blanket like a schoolboy caught in the act. Nikki turned her head, her eyes wet, not from shame, but rather from emotion. And then she simply said, "Oh my God. Christian." He stood there looking at her, unable to say anything. The rolls fell from his hands. "You're back early," she added, sitting down and trying to cover herself with a pillow. Her voice trembled. She didn't scream. She didn't make anything up. She just looked him in the eyes. I didn't want you to find out like this." Mike was silent. He lowered his gaze, grabbed his pants, and left the room without saying a word. Christian couldn't help himself, he punched the door so hard that it creaked. But he didn't follow him. He stayed. In front of her. How long, was all he could say. 5 weeks, she didn't look away. She didn't hide. I didn't plan it. I felt lost. And he was just, there. Christian laughs. He laughs strangely, hollowly. There. Did you need a doctor or a lover? I don't know, damn it, she suddenly burst out. I don't know. I was losing myself. Do you think it's easy for me to be like this? I'm tired all the time, my chest hurts, my body feels foreign, I'm afraid of the baby, I'm afraid of you, I'm afraid of myself. And he was there. He was just there. And I couldn't help myself. Christian stood there, silent. He wanted to scream, to break something, but he couldn't. His chest hurt as if his heart had been torn out, torn in half, and then he had been made to look at it. And he said quietly, and I carried you to the bathroom when you couldn't walk. I cooked for you. I read at night about how to help a woman after childbirth. I loved you. And you. I still love you, Christian, she interrupted. I'm not lying. I just broke down. Silence hung between them like a knife. Emma cried out in her crib, the first sound in all that time. Christian glanced at her and quickly went into the nursery, picking up his daughter. Her little body shook with tears. He hugged her like never before. Nikki remained sitting on the bed, covered with the same blanket that, an hour ago, had smelled of their life together. The hours following the discovery of the betrayal were like a blurred film. Christian couldn't remember how he put Emma to bed, how he reheated the leftovers from dinner, although he didn't touch them. He just sat in a chair by the window, holding a cup of cold tea, listening to the house breathe in a silence that felt more like a vacuum. Nikki didn't dare approach him. She locked herself in the bathroom at first. Then she quietly went down to the kitchen. But Christian didn't say a word to her. There was no point. After midnight, she broke the silence herself. She sat down opposite him on the floor, tired, barefoot, with tousled hair and the look of someone who expects nothing. We need to talk, she said quietly, as if afraid to scare him with a single word. He didn't answer. Christian, please. Speak, he finally muttered, without taking his eyes off the darkness outside the window. She sighed. I'm not looking for excuses. You have every right to feel angry, hateful, whatever. I did it. And I won't say I didn't know what I was doing. I knew. It's just. I felt like I wasn't alive. And he was the only one who saw me. Not as a mother. Not as a patient. As a woman. And who did I see you as? Christian asked quietly. A cleaning lady? An incubator? No. She replied emotionally. But you disappeared too. You became so perfect that I wanted to scream. I was in shit, Christian, and you stood there the whole time, silent, strong, right. And I felt even worse. Because I was neither strong nor right. I was a wreck. Christian laughed bitterly. So, I'm to blame for your betrayal because I was too good? No, she lowered her eyes. You were just too distant. You didn't see me drowning. And I didn't scream. Because I couldn't. But Mike, he was there. He asked how I was. He touched me gently. Not like a doctor. And I gave in. Once. Then again. And again. And you fucked in our bedroom while I was working to pay for the house where you were cheating on me, his voice trembled. I know how it sounds. And I know I lost you. Maybe forever. But I don't want to lie to you about anything. You need to know that I didn't want to love someone else. It wasn't love. It was an escape. A stupid, weak escape. Christian stood up abruptly. And the child? He looked straight into her eyes. She saw your eyes when you looked at him. She's learning to trust by the way we look at each other. How are you going to explain this to her? Nikki sobbed. For the first time that evening, she cried. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. Only one thing, I want to remain a mother. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for a second chance. But I'm asking you not to take Emma away from me. Christian was silent for a long time. His heart screamed, she was a traitor, she had ruined everything, she had lost the right to a family. But another part of him, the part that remembered her laughter, her voice, their nighttime conversations before bed, her hands on his chest, begged him to give her a chance. But it was too late. I'm filing for divorce, he said evenly. Emma is staying with me. And I'll do everything I can to make sure you have the right to see her. But nothing more. Christian. I'm not seeking revenge, Nikki. I just can't trust you anymore. And I won't let our daughter live a lie, even if it's an honest one. She sat silently, hugging her knees. He went upstairs to the nursery. Emma was already asleep. He lay down next to her on the small bed, listening to her breathing. It was the first night he had left the woman he once loved on the other side of the door. After that night, time ceased to be linear for Christian. He couldn't remember what day of the week it was. He didn't know how many hours he had slept, or if he had slept at all. He woke up every morning not because he wanted to live that day, but because he had to. Emma demanded attention. And she was his only support. She cried, laughed, reached out to him, with no idea that their family's world would never be the same again. Christian carried her in his arms, prepared her formula, changed her diapers, read fairy tales aloud, even though his voice trembled and his eyes couldn't see the letters. He held on with all his might. But the pain did not fade. It became a part of him. An uninvited guest who sat next to him on every chair, in every car, even when he held his daughter in his arms. It wasn't just a breakup. It was the loss of an entire world he believed in. The idea that they were a team. That she was honest. That he was enough. It turned out that he wasn't. At night, he woke up from his dreams. Once, he dreamed that Nikki was holding Emma and handing her to Mike. They both walked away, and he stood in the middle of an empty house, screaming, but no one heard him. He woke up with his back wet with sweat and immediately ran to the nursery, his daughter was asleep, everything was quiet. But his heart continued to beat like a drum for a long time. Every day, Christian felt his emotions change, often without any control. One moment he was calm, cooking porridge, mopping the floor, feeding Emma. The next, he smashed a cup against the sink because the smell of shampoo reminded him of Nikki. And not because of hatred. Because of pain. Because of memories. She used to smell like that. Once, this room was filled with their morning kisses. And now, emptiness. One day, while he was putting away the baby's things in the closet, he found an old note from Nikki that she had left him before giving birth. "You are the best husband and father, and I don't know what I would do without you." Her handwriting, the round letters, the little heart instead of a period, it all hit him like a hammer. He sat down on the floor and cried. Not restrainedly, not bravely, truly. Like a person who had been broken deep inside. And then there were conversations. Christian's mother found out what had happened. She was silent at first. Then she said only one thing. "She wasn't yours even before the betrayal. You just didn't see it." And that hurt even more. Because he wanted to believe that betrayal was a mistake, not the end. That it wasn't where it all started. But what if his mother was right? Nikki tried to talk to him several times. She wrote, she called. She asked to meet at least in the presence of a lawyer. Christian allowed her to see Emma only on weekends, under supervision. She cried at the door when she first came. She said she missed her. That she wanted to be there. But Christian didn't open his heart to her anymore. He learned to keep the key deep in his pocket. But even with all his anger, he couldn't erase her from his memory. That's probably the most painful part of betrayal, not the fact of physical betrayal itself, but the fact that the person who betrays you is the one with whom you plan to be buried in the same cemetery. He remembered their conversations in the kitchen. How she dreamed of traveling to Italy. How they laughed together when they tried to cook pasta and had a night of just pizza and movies. How she stroked his face when he was sick. And how easily it all turned into a lie. One of the worst moments came when Christian accidentally ran into Mike in the supermarket parking lot. He came up to him and said, "Christian, I'm sorry. I lost a patient, a friend, and trust. And I'm ready to face the consequences." "Don't talk about consequences," Christian said. "The consequences are that every morning my daughter asks, 'Where's Mom?' And I have to come up with answers that aren't lies, but that won't break her heart the way you broke mine." He didn't hit him. Although he wanted to. But not to make Mike feel pain. To feel something himself. But there was nothing left. He returned home, back to Emma, and knew, now it was only her. She was the reason he got up every day when the whole world was pulling him down. Christian understood one thing, a betrayed man has two choices. Either he lets the pain destroy him completely, or he uses it as building material. And he chose the latter, not because it was easier. But because he had no right to fall when he had Emma in his arms. She did not choose this chaos. She was the result of a love that, despite everything, had once existed. And he had to be her foundation. He started with the basics, a clear routine. Morning, walk, feeding, playtime. Evening, bath, fairy tale, song. His days became predictable, but that was what gave him the stability he so lacked inside. Emma laughed, she learned to say her first words. And when she said, "Daddy," one day, Christian cried, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. At the same time, the legal process was underway. Christian's lawyer, cold and precise, advised him not to delay. "You have emotional and factual evidence of infidelity. Given her psychological state after giving birth and your stability, you will have full custody. But be prepared for resistance." And there was resistance. Nikki did not want to give up her daughter completely. She came to the hearings in tears, with papers from her psychotherapist, with explanations. She did not deny the betrayal. She admitted that she had broken down, but she did not want to be deprived of motherhood. Christian listened to all this with mixed feelings. He did not see a monster in front of him. He saw a person who had made a choice and was now paying for it. And even though it hurt him, he felt sorry for her. But that was not enough to forgive her. Because forgiving meant trusting again. And he could no longer allow himself to be vulnerable around her. The court ruled, full custody, Christian. Nikki was given a visitation schedule, twice a week, only in the presence of a supervisor or at a special parenting center. She sat silently in the courtroom, her hands clenched, her face pale. He did not rejoice in his victory. It was not a victory. It was a necessity. After the trial, she approached him in the parking lot. "I know I don't deserve it. But thank you for giving me at least this chance. Emma shouldn't have to pay for my mistakes." "She won't," Christian replied. "But she won't be part of your game if you break down again. If you want to be a mother, start with yourself." That was the limit. Not hostility, not reconciliation. Just a limit. And Christian learned to live with it. Gradually, he began to build a different life. He signed up for therapy. At first, he felt resistance. It seemed that psychology was for the weak. But over time, he realized that it wasn't about weakness. It was about survival. He learned to name his emotions, understand his triggers, and relieve tension not with anger, but with awareness. The friends who disappeared after the breakup slowly returned. One of them, Jake, said, "I didn't know what to say. It's such a mess, bro. But you're hanging in there, and that's respect." Christian didn't need sympathy. He wanted something simple, to be a decent dad. To become someone Emma could be proud of. A year after the divorce, he got a tattoo on his chest. A small image of the rising sun, a symbol that even after the darkest night, light comes. He wanted to remember not the pain, but what he had survived. One evening, as he sat with Emma on the porch, the girl touched his cheek and said, "Dad, are you happy?" He smiled, hugged her, and replied, "Yes. I'm happy because I have you." And at that moment, he realized that betrayal did not define him. What defined him was how he had come out of it. And how he had not allowed it to break him completely. Almost 2 years had passed since Christian found out about the betrayal. And although time had not erased the memories, it had taught him to look at them differently. The wounds that had seemed fatal had become scars, visible but not painful. Life had not returned to its previous state, but it had become different. Deeper. More real. Christian wasn't looking for a new relationship. Not because he was afraid to trust, but because for the first time in a long time, he felt whole without someone else around. He no longer needed a woman to validate him. He was a father who could handle everything on his own. And he did it with dignity. Emma was growing up fast. She loved reading books, just like him. She liked it when he made funny voices, imitating fairy tale characters. And every time she laughed, Christian knew he had made the right choice. Nikki was still seeing their daughter. She seemed to have really started working on herself. She had undergone therapy, found a new job, and no longer looked for excuses. Christian watched this calmly, from a distance. And although trust never returned, the anger disappeared. Once, when they met to hand over Emma, Nikki said, "You know, I sometimes think, what if I had stopped then?" Christian replied without anger. "And sometimes I think, what if I hadn't come home early?" They both smiled sadly. Life is not a script. Sometimes you break it yourself, sometimes it breaks you. But the main thing is what you do after that. On Sunday, Christian packed his things and took Emma to the ocean. It was their little tradition. Once a month, they would get in the car and drive to a place where everything was noisy but silent. They sat on the sand, ate ice cream, Emma built sandcastles, and he just looked at her. In moments like these, he realized clearly, the worst things in his life hadn't broken him. They had transformed him. Made him stronger. Wiser. And, importantly, softer. Because true strength isn't about not feeling pain, it's about not losing the ability to love after you've been hurt. As they drove home, Emma fell asleep in the back seat. Christian turned on some soft music and thought, I did it. We did it. And although life would never be the same again, it had become better. Different. Real. Without illusions. Without lies. And with boundless love for that little heart that had once saved him from darkness. Subscribe and like, and send the video to your friends.